Dr. Elena Vasquez stared at the gray metal walls of Mining Station 7. The walls were cold and smooth, like everything else the aliens had built to hold humans. She touched the small device behind her ear. The neural implant hummed softly. Always working, always watching her thoughts. 50 years ago, when Elena was just a child, the aliens came to Earth. They did not come as friends. The Galactic Council had voted. Every alien species agreed. Humans were too dangerous to be free. Humans asked too many questions. Humans never gave up when things seemed impossible. This made the aliens nervous, so they put chains on human minds. Instead of human bodies, Elena walked down the long hallway toward the control room. Her footsteps echoed in the empty space. Through the windows, she could see other humans working in the mines below. They moved slowly, like sleepwalkers. The implants made sure of that. No fast movements. No creative thinking. No hope for escape. Mining facilities stretched for miles under the surface of Kepler 442b. This planet was far from Earth, far from the sun that humans once called home. The rocks here contained rare metals that the aliens needed for their ships. Humans were good at finding these metals. Even with the implants, humans could solve problems that confused alien minds. Elena reached the control room and sat down at her desk. Numbers filled the screens in front of her. Production reports, worker health data, equipment status. She was supposed to make sure everything ran smoothly. The aliens trusted her because the implant made sure she could not rebel. But something was different today. A red warning light blinked on her main screen. Elena frowned and opened the message. The words made her heart beat faster, even through the implant's calming effects. Emergency council session. Threat level, extinction. All mining operations may be suspended. Elena had never seen an extinction-level threat warning before. She opened more files, her fingers moving faster than they had in years. The implant tried to slow her down, but something stronger was pushing back. The files showed pictures of space. Dark shapes moved between the stars like hungry shadows. The aliens called them the Void Swarm. They came from outside the galaxy, eating entire solar systems. Planets, stars, even space itself disappeared when they passed. Elena's implant buzzed with pain. She was thinking too fast, too creatively. But she could not stop reading. The alien scientists had run thousands of computer tests. Every single test showed the same result. Only human minds could find a way to stop the Void Swarm. Only humans could think in the strange, impossible ways needed to fight something that broke the rules of reality. But humans were slaves. Their minds were chained. Their creativity was locked away behind neural implants. Elena stood up so fast, her chair fell over. Pain shot through her skull as the implant tried to force her to sit back down. She fought against it, thinking about her daughter Sarah. Sarah had been 15 when the aliens took them. Now Sarah was somewhere in the galaxy, probably working in another mine, another factory, another cage. For 50 years, Elena had watched humans die. Some died from overwork. Some died from medical experiments. Some just gave up and let there. Hearts stopped beating. The aliens always said it was necessary. Humans were too dangerous to be free. Now they needed that danger. Alana's hands shook as she accessed the communication system. She was not supposed to contact other stations. The implant should have stopped her. But somehow, she managed to send a message to every human facility in this sector. "They need us," she typed. "The thing they feared in us is the only thing that can save them." Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out in secret. Captain Lisa Chun, daughter of the famous Admiral Sarah Chun, sat in the hidden base of the human underground resistance. The resistance was small and weak, but they had learned to hide from alien scanners. They had also learned to hack alien. Communication Systems. Lisa watched the emergency council session through stolen video feeds. The great chamber where all alien species met was in chaos. The delegates shouted at each other in dozens of different languages. Fear filled the air like smoke. Chancellor Zethar of the Zephyrians stood at the center of the chaos. His blue skin had turned pale with worry. The Zephyrians had built the neural implant technology. They were proud of their smart machines and careful control systems. "We must consider all options," Zethar said, his voice shaking. "The computer models are clear. Human cognitive patterns show unique problem-solving abilities that may be effective against the swarm." Ambassador Zerthik of the Kethmori slammed, his massive fist on his desk. The Kethmori were warriors who had built the labor camps and guard systems. "You suggest we free the humans? After we spent decades proving they are too dangerous?" "The danger is exactly what we need," replied Dr. Viganol of the Vortani. The Vortani had designed the neural implants that controlled human minds. "Our studies show that human creativity comes from their ability to ignore impossible odds. They find solutions where logical minds see only failure." The chamber erupted in angry voices. Some aliens wanted to keep humans as slaves, but forced them to fight. Others suggested giving humans limited freedom. A few brave voices called for complete liberation. Lisa Chun smiled grimly as she watched. The aliens were learning what the Resistance had always known. You cannot chain creativity and expect it to save you. In another part of the galaxy, the first Void Swarm Scouts had reached the outer rim. The aliens sent their best warships to investigate. Admiral Korthul of the mighty Scarthul fleet was confident his people had conquered dozens of worlds. Their weapons could crack planets. The first scout was only the size of a small moon. Admiral Korthul attacked it with everything he had: laser cannons that could melt continents, missiles that could destroy stars, shields that had never been broken. None of it mattered. The Void Swarm Scout ate the energy from the weapons. It drank the power from the shields. It swallowed the missiles like candy. Then it reached out with invisible hands and began to eat. Admiral Korthul's ships. The metal did not melt or break. It simply stopped existing. One moment the ships were there. The next moment there was only empty space where they used to be. Admiral Korthul's final message echoed across the galaxy. "It is not destroying us. It is unmaking us. We never existed at all." Back on Kepler 442b, Elena felt her implant sparking and failing. Across the galaxy, the same thing was happening to millions of humans. The alien control systems were breaking down as their creators panicked. Elena walked to the window and looked down at the mines. Other humans were stopping their work. They stood up straight for the first time in decades. They looked around with clear eyes, remembering what it felt like to think freely. One by one, they began to smile. Elena knew that everything was about to change. The aliens had spent 50 years trying to make humans safe and controllable. Now they would learn what humans were like when they had nothing left to lose. The Void Swarm was coming to eat the galaxy. The aliens who had enslaved humanity were about to discover whether their victims would choose to save them. Elena touched her failing implant one last time. Then she walked toward the communication center. She had a message to send to every human. In the galaxy. It was time to remind the universe why they had been afraid of humanity in the first place. 3 weeks after the neural implants began failing, the first alien ship appeared over Earth. It was not a warship this time. The sleek vessel carried diplomatic flags and broadcast peaceful messages in every human language. President Maria Santos stood on the observation deck of the new Geneva space station. She had been elected just days ago by the freed human population. The voting had been chaotic. 50 years of slavery had not prepared humanity for sudden freedom, but they had chosen. Her because she remembered the old ways. She remembered when humans governed themselves. The alien ship docked with careful, respectful movements. No forced boarding. No weapons. The aliens were asking permission to come aboard their own former prison. President Santos wore a simple black suit. Behind her stood advisors and guards, all of them former slaves who still had marks from their neural implants. The scars behind their ears were small but visible, reminders of what had been done to them. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. 17 alien delegates walked through, representing every species that had voted to enslave humanity. They moved slowly, their heads down. Some of them shook with fear or shame. Ambassador Zerthak of the Kethmori led the group. He was 8 feet tall with gray skin and 4 arms. His people were warriors who had built the camps where humans died. Now he looked like a giant child afraid of punishment. President Santos, he said through his translator device. The machine struggled with words his species rarely used. We ... We come to speak of our ... our wrong actions. President Santos did not smile. She gestured to the conference table. Sit. The aliens sat awkwardly in chairs made for human bodies. Some were too large, others too small. None of them seemed comfortable. Behind President Santos, a holographic display showed numbers in blue light. The human delegates wanted the aliens to see these numbers clearly. 847 million, President Santos said quietly. That is how many humans died under your care. Some worked to death in your mines. Some died in your medical experiments. Some were killed when they tried to resist. Some just gave up and stopped breathing. The Vortani delegate, Dr. Shinak, made a sound like crying. Her people had created the neural implants. They were proud of their science and technology. Now she stared at the numbers like they were a disease. We did not know, Dr. Shinak whispered. The computers said the humans were happy. The brain scans showed no pain signals. Because you programmed the implants to hide our pain, said Dr. Elena Vasquez. She had arrived from Kepler 442b that morning. Her hair was gray now, but her eyes burned with 50 years of anger. You made us smile while we died inside. Chancellor Zephyr of the Zephyrians stood up slowly. His blue skin had turned pale purple with shame. The void swarm approaches. Our fleets cannot stop it. Our weapons are useless. Every computer model shows the same result. Only human minds can find a solution. So you want our help, President Santos said. It was not a question. Yes, Ambassador Zerthik admitted. We ... we need you. President Santos looked at each alien delegate. She saw fear in their eyes. Not fear of the void swarm. Fear of humans. They had spent 50 years proving that humans were dangerous. Now they needed that danger to save them. The void swarm will eat everyone, said the hegemony delegate, General Scorthol. His people were the most warlike in the galaxy, including Earth, including humans. We must work together, or all will die. Then we will die as free people, President Santos replied. We will not save the galaxy that watched our children die. In your cages, the silence stretched for long minutes. Some of the aliens began to make soft crying sounds. Others sat perfectly still, staring at the table. Finally, Dr. Elena Vasquez stood up. She walked around the table until she stood directly in front of Chancellor Zephyr. He flinched as she approached, expecting violence. You want our help? Elena said. Then you will live under the same rules you gave us. Every species that enslaved humans will accept human oversight. You will surrender your governments to us. You will let us control your military forces. You will give up your freedom just like you took ours. The aliens gasped. Some jumped to their feet in anger. General Scortho roared and reached for a weapon that was not there. Security had not allowed weapons in the meeting. "Impossible," shouted Dr. Shenak. "We cannot surrender our civilization to ... To what?" Elena asked. "To the dangerous humans? To the species you are so afraid? Of that you put chains on our minds? This is not negotiation," protested Chancellor Zethver. "This is revenge." President Santos stood and walked to the window. Outside, Earth floated in space like a blue jewel. 50 years ago, it had been the center of human civilization. Now it was just another world in the alien empire. "You are wrong," she said without turning around. "Revenge would be letting the void swarm eat you while we watch. This is justice. You will learn what it feels like to have others control your lives. And if we refuse?" Asked Ambassador ZUR single quotes THEK. Elena smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "Then you will face the void swarm with your own clever plans. The same plans that failed against the scouts. The same weapons that could not hurt even the smallest pieces of the swarm." The meeting broke up in chaos. Some aliens shouted in anger. Others begged for different terms. A few simply sat in silence, understanding that they had no choice. Over. The following days, the galaxy split apart. Some species agreed to human oversight immediately. They were the ones who had seen the void swarm destroy Admiral Korthul's fleet. They knew that pride was a luxury they could not afford. Others tried to find a middle path. They offered to work with humans as partners, not subjects. President Santos rejected every compromise. Humanity had learned that partial freedom was no freedom at all. The worst reaction came from the hegemony of Scarthul. General Scarthul returned to his homeworld and gave a speech to his people. He called humans ungrateful slaves who should be grateful for the order we gave their chaos. The hegemony decided to prove they did not need human help. They gathered their greatest fleet and attacked the void swarm directly. 200 warships with weapons that could destroy planets. Shields that had never been broken. Soldiers who had conquered half the galaxy. The battle lasted 3 hours. Captain Lisa Chun watched the fight from her hidden base. The human underground resistance had been monitoring alien communications for decades. Now they watched in silence as the hegemony fleet met the void swarm's main force. The alien weapons hit the swarm entities and simply disappeared, not blocked or deflected. They ceased to exist the moment they touched the dark shapes. The swarm reached out with invisible hands and began to unmake the ships. One by one, the great warships of the hegemony stopped existing. The metal did not melt or explode. It was there 1 second and gone the next, as if it had never been built. General Scarthul's final transmission echoed across the galaxy. "We were wrong. We were all wrong. The humans. The humans are our only hope." Then his flagship vanished. Like smoke in the wind, the news of the hegemony's destruction spread quickly. Alien governments that had refused human oversight began to reconsider. Fear was a powerful teacher, and the void swarm was an excellent example. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the same control room where she had worked as a slave. But now human flags hung on the walls. Free humans operated the equipment. The neural implant technology had been completely destroyed. Through the speakers came messages from across the galaxy. Species after species contacted Earth, begging for human help. They offered to surrender their autonomy. They promised to accept human leadership. They swore they had learned from their mistakes. Elena listened to their desperate voices and felt no satisfaction. Justice was necessary, but it tasted bitter. She thought about all the humans who had died and would never see this day. They would never know that their sacrifice had meaning, but the living had work to do. The void swarm was still coming, and humanity had a galaxy to save, even if that galaxy had never deserved saving in the first place. 6 months had passed since the aliens agreed to human oversight. The galaxy looked very different now. On worlds that had once been centers of alien power, humans walked freely through government buildings, giving orders to their former masters, Dr. James Park stood in the main laboratory of Zephyria Prime, the homeworld of the species that had created the neural implant technology. Around him, Zephyrian scientists worked quietly at their stations. Their blue hands shook as they dismantled the machines. They had spent their lives building. James had been a slave for 23 years. The neural implant had been in his head since he was 15 years old. For more than 2 decades, the device had controlled his thoughts, suppressed his creativity, and made him compliant. Now he watched the aliens destroy the technology that had stolen his youth. "Dr. Park," said Chief Scientist Valinara, approaching with her head down, "we have finished destroying the prototype implants. All research data has been erased. The manufacturing facilities are being torn down." James nodded, but did not smile. Valinara had not personally put the implant in his head, but she had helped design the systems that made it possible. Her shame was real, but it could not give him back the years he had lost. "What about the backup files?" James asked. "Destroyed," Valinara said quickly. "Every copy, every schematic, every piece of code. We have made sure this technology can never be rebuilt." Through the laboratory windows, James could see Zephyrian workers tearing down the massive implant factories. They worked alongside human supervisors, learning to see their former slaves as people with rights and feelings. Some of the aliens wept as they destroyed their life's work. Others worked in grim silence, understanding that this was their punishment. For what they had done, the process was happening across the galaxy. On Kethmer, the warrior species was learning to live without conquest and domination. General Thacurau, who had once commanded slave labor camps, now worked in a human-run refugee center. He helped alien civilians who had lost their homes to the advancing Void Swarm. The Kethmori had built their entire culture around being strong and taking what they wanted from weaker species. Now they had to learn new ways of thinking. Some adapted quickly, finding honor in protecting others instead of conquering them. Others struggled with the change, unable to understand how serving could be more noble than ruling. Captain Lisa Chun walked through the corridors of the USS Redemption, the first ship designed by humans and aliens working together. The vessel was strange to look at. Human creativity had been combined with alien engineering in ways that neither species could have achieved alone. The ship's crew was carefully balanced. Former slaves worked next to former slave masters. Each species contributed their unique skills while learning to trust each other. It was not easy. 50 years of hatred could not be erased in 6 months. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Rixno, a young Vortani whose parents had helped design neural implants. "The new shield tests are ready." Lisa followed him to the engineering section. Dr. Elena Vasquez was there, working with a team that included both humans and reformed Vortani scientists. They had been developing new defensive technology based on an impossible idea. What if they could turn the Void Swarm's consumption power back on itself? "The theory is sound," Elena explained as they gathered around a small test chamber. "The swarm consumes matter and energy by convincing reality that they never existed. But human minds can hold 2 contradictory ideas at the same time. We can believe something exists and doesn't exist simultaneously." "That makes no logical sense," said Dr. Kelver, a Vortani physicist. "Exactly," Elena smiled. "Logic is what makes your species vulnerable to the swarm. Human illogic might be what saves us all." The test began. A small piece of Void Swarm material, captured from a destroyed scout, was placed in the chamber. Normal shields around it flickered and failed as the material tried to consume them. But when the new human-designed shields activated, Something different happened. The swarm material touched the shield and stopped. It could not consume something that human minds insisted both existed and did not exist at the same time. The contradiction confused its reality-altering abilities. "It works," Dr. Kelver whispered, "but only when human brains are actively involved in the shield operation. Alien minds cannot maintain the necessary paradox." This was the key discovery that changed everything. Human creativity was not just useful against the Void Swarm. It was essential. No alien species could replicate the human ability to think impossible thoughts and make them real, but cooperation was still fragile. News arrived that made everyone remember how far they still had to go. The Dominion of Siktar had been one of the smaller alien governments. They had reluctantly agreed to human oversight after seeing what happened to the hegemony. But some of their leaders had been secretly planning rebellion. Admiral Corthus led a faction that believed aliens should never submit to inferior human minds. He had been gathering ships and weapons in secret, planning to overthrow the human supervisors and restore alien rule. His rebellion lasted 2 days. The Void Swarm had been monitoring the galaxy's defenses. When Admiral Corthus withdrew his ships from the defense line to attack human facilities, the swarm immediately moved through the gap. 3 sectar colonies were consumed before Admiral Corthus realized his mistake. The Admiral's final message was broadcast across the galaxy. "We were fools. Pride made us blind. The humans are our only hope. Do not repeat our error." After that, alien resistance to human leadership mostly disappeared. The species that had once considered themselves superior to humans now competed to prove their loyalty and repentance. But not all changes came from fear. On the research ship Harmony, Dr. Sarah Okafor worked with alien scientists who genuinely wanted to make amends for their species' crimes. They spent their days developing new technologies that could help both humans and aliens. "Dr. Okafor," said research assistant Vanthara, a young Zephyrian, "I have been studying human history. Your species endured slavery before, on your own world. How did you forgive your oppressors?" Sarah paused in her work. "We didn't," she said honestly. "Not completely. Even hundreds of years later, the pain remained. But we learned that holding on to hatred hurt us more than it hurt those who had wronged us. So forgiveness is for the forgiver, not the forgiven? Sometimes. But real forgiveness requires the oppressor to change, to prove they understand what they did wrong. Your people are doing that now." Then Thara was quiet for a moment. "My grandfather helped design the first neural implants. He believed he was making humans better, more peaceful. I know now that he was wrong, but he thought he was helping." "Good intentions don't excuse evil actions," Sarah said gently. "But they can be the foundation for genuine change." Meanwhile, the Void Swarm continued its advance. More alien worlds fell every day, but now there was hope. The combined human-alien fleets were holding key positions. The new shields worked, but only when operated by human crews working closely with alien engineers. Dr. James Park received a personal message that changed his perspective on everything. It came from Velinara, the Zephyrian scientist who had helped destroy the implant technology. "Dr. Park," the message began, "I know I cannot undo what my people did to you, but I want you to know that destroying those machines was the most important work of my life. Every day I think about the humans who suffered because of technology I helped create. I will spend the rest of my life trying to make amends." James read the message 3 times. He thought about the years of slavery, the lost opportunities, the pain of having his mind controlled. The anger was still there. It might always be there, but something else was growing alongside the anger. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition that some of his former oppressors were genuinely trying to change. The first major test was coming. Long-range sensors showed the Void Swarm's main force approaching the Helix Nebula, a strategic location that controlled access to 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. If they lost the nebula, billions of worlds would fall. Captain Chun stood on the bridge of the Redemption, surrounded by humans and aliens working together. The crew had trained for months, learning to coordinate their different ways of thinking. Trust was still fragile, but it was growing stronger. "All ships report ready," announced Communications Officer Torres. Lisa looked at her mixed crew. Former enemies preparing to fight and die for each other. It was not perfect trust, but it was enough to begin with. "Take us to the Helix Nebula," she ordered. "It's time to see if cooperation can overcome conquest." The Helix Nebula stretched across space like a giant eye, its colorful gases swirling in patterns that had existed for millions of years. Now those ancient clouds would witness the most important battle in galactic history. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the command deck of the flagship Unity, watching as hundreds of ships took their positions. The fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human vessels flew alongside alien warships, their crews working together despite decades of hatred and mistrust. "Admiral," reported Commander Hayes, "all ships are in position. Human alien. Crews report ready for combat." Sarah nodded, but her stomach felt tight with worry. This was not just a battle against the Void Swarm. This was a test of whether former enemies could truly trust each other when death was close. The swarm's main force appeared at the edge of the nebula like a spreading stain of darkness. The entities moved without ships or engines, flowing through space as if reality bent around them. They were larger than anything the galaxy had faced before. Some were the size of moons. Others stretched across distances that should have taken light hours to cross. "All units," Sarah broadcast to the fleet, "remember your training. Human crews maintain the paradox shields. Alien crews provide power and targeting. We succeed together, or we die apart." On the USS Redemption, Captain Lisa Chun watched her mixed crew work at their stations. Lieutenant Commander Rick Snall, the young Vortani, operated the power systems, while human technicians maintained the impossible shield equations in their minds. The technology only worked when both species cooperated perfectly. "Paradox shields at full strength," reported Chief Engineer Vasquez from the engine room. "But, Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the swarm. These entities are much larger than the scouts we faced before." Lisa gripped her command chair as the first wave of swarm entities reached the outer defense line. The alien commanders had wanted to meet them with conventional weapons. Sarah Chun had insisted they try something different. "All ships execute Nebula Protocol," Sarah ordered. What happened next had never been attempted in galactic history. Instead of fighting the Void Swarm directly, the human-alien fleet began to turn the nebula itself into a weapon. Human engineers had studied the gas clouds for months, working with alien scientists to understand their structure. The plan was insane. They would use the nebula's own gravity and magnetic fields to trap the swarm entities, then collapse sections of the cloud onto them. It required perfect timing between human creativity and alien precision. "Gravitational anchors away," reported the Kethmori heavy cruiser Redemption's honor. Captain Nikuler, whose father had built slave camps, now risked his life to protect. Human colonies dot the gravitational devices, designed by former enemies working together, spread through the nebula. They began to alter the cloud's natural flow, creating artificial currents and eddies. The Void Swarm entities found themselves caught in streams of ionized gas that pulled them in directions they did not expect, but the swarm was learning. The entities began to adapt, using their reality-altering powers to consume the gravitational anchors. Normal technology failed as soon as they touched it. "Human crews, activate personal paradox fields," Sarah ordered. You need to be physically connected to the anchor controls. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. Human crew members had to put themselves in direct contact with equipment that the Void Swarm was trying to unmake. If their concentration failed for even a second, they would cease to exist. On the light cruiser Harmony, Dr. James Park pressed his hands against the control panel of a gravitational anchor. The Void Swarm was trying to consume the device, but his human mind insisted it both existed and did not exist simultaneously. The contradiction held the anchor in reality long enough for it to do its work. "It's working," Park reported through gritted teeth. "But I can feel them pushing against my thoughts. It's like they're trying to convince my brain that I was never born." Similar scenes played out across the fleet. Human crew members held reality together through sheer willpower, while their alien colleagues provided the technical expertise to make the weapons function. Trust was no longer a choice. It was survival. The battle turned when Captain Zerthak of the Kethmori battleship Atonement made a decision that shocked everyone. His ship was surrounded by swarm entities that had broken through the outer defenses. Conventional weapons could not hurt them. His shields were failing. "This is Captain Zerthak to all human vessels in this sector." His voice came over the radio. "I am going to ram the central entity. Use my ship's explosion to trigger the nebula collapse sequence." "Negative, Atonement," Lisa Chun responded. "There are other options." "No," Zerthak said firmly. "My grandfather helped vote to enslave your people. My father built the camps where humans died. I choose to break that chain of shame. Tell the humans. Tell them we can be better than we were." The Atonement accelerated toward the largest swarm entity, its engines pushing beyond safe limits. As the ship struck the dark mass, Captain Zerthak triggered his ship's reactor overload. The explosion created a chain reaction that collapsed an entire section of the nebula onto the swarm. The tactic worked. Millions of tons of ionized gas crashed down on the Void Swarm entities, guided by gravitational fields that human minds kept anchored in reality. The entities tried to consume the gas, but there was too much of it coming too fast. But victory came at a terrible cost. The Vortani, medical ship Healing Light, had been evacuating wounded from a damaged space station. When swarm entities broke through the defense line, the ship found itself directly in their path. Admiral Tavara, whose grandmother had designed neural implants, ordered her crew to abandon ship. "I will stay," she announced. "The human patients cannot be moved quickly enough. I will not leave them to die." Dr. Sarah Okafor, who had been working on the medical ship, refused to evacuate. "I'm staying too. These people need medical care." "You are human," Tavara said. "You can escape. I am the one who must pay for my family's crimes." "We're in this together now," Sarah replied. "That means we live together or die together." The Healing Light's human and alien crew worked side by side. As swarm entities surrounded their ship, they could not fight, so they focused on saving lives. Human doctors and alien medics treated patients of both species, while reality itself seemed to bend around them. When the ship's shields finally failed, Tavara made a final transmission. "Tell my people that I learned what honor truly means. It is not conquering others. It is protecting those who cannot protect themselves." The medical ship was consumed, but its sacrifice bought time for evacuation vessels to rescue thousands of civilians from the space station. As the battle continued, more acts of heroism emerged from the alliance of former enemies. The Zephyrian pilot Kelananos, whose people had transported human slaves, now flew repeated missions to evacuate human children from a damaged colony ship. A human engineer named Marcus Webb worked alongside Kethmori technicians to keep life support running on a crippled alien frigate, even though the same species had killed his entire family. The turning point came when Dr. Elena Vasquez made a breakthrough from her position on the Unity. She had been studying the swarm's behavior during the battle, looking for patterns that alien logic might miss. "Admiral," she called to Sarah Chun, "I think I understand how they work. They don't just consume matter and energy. They consume the memory of things. That's why our paradox shields work. Human minds can remember something even while forgetting it." "What are you suggesting?" Sarah asked. "We stop trying to destroy them. Instead, we make the entire galaxy remember them differently." If enough human minds can hold the idea that the swarm is just empty space, we might be able to make that true. It was the most impossible plan yet attempted. Every human in the fleet would have to coordinate their thoughts, imagining the same alternative reality simultaneously. They would have to convince the universe that the void swarm had never existed. "All human personnel," Sarah broadcast, "focus. Your minds on empty space. Picture the nebula as it was before the swarm arrived. Remember it being peaceful and beautiful. Forget that there was ever anything else here." Across the fleet, thousands of human minds began to work together. They remembered the nebula without the swarm. They insisted that the gas clouds had always been empty and calm. They forgot that dark entities had ever existed in this place. Slowly, impossibly, the void swarm began to fade. The entities did not explode or retreat. They simply became less real with each passing moment. Their dark forms grew transparent. Their reality-bending powers weakened. The universe began to accept the human version of events over its own memory. When the last swarm entity disappeared, the nebula was quiet and beautiful again. The gas clouds swirled in their ancient patterns as if nothing had ever disturbed them. The fleet remained motionless for several minutes, hardly believing what they had accomplished. Former slaves and former masters had worked together to achieve something impossible. They had rewritten reality itself through the power of coordinated imagination. "All ships report," Sarah Chun ordered, her voice shaking with exhaustion and wonder. The responses came in slowly. Many ships had been damaged. Many lives had been lost. But they had won. The galaxy was safe. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Helix Nebula. The galaxy was rebuilding, but the scars ran deep in both metal and memory. On New Geneva Station, the same place where aliens had once begged for human help, something different was happening. Now Dr. Elena Vasquez walked slowly through the memorial garden, her hair now completely white, but her eyes still sharp. She stopped before a wall made of black stone, where millions of names were carved in tiny letters. Every human who had died during the 50 years of slavery was remembered here. Sarah Elizabeth Chun, age 15, died in Labor Camp 7. Michael Torres, age 34, died during medical experiments. Little Anna Kim, age 8, died of exhaustion in the mines. The names went on, covering walls that stretched for hundreds of meters. Elena touched one name gently. David Vasquez, age 12. Her son. He had died in the first year of slavery, before the neural implants were perfected, when the aliens still used physical force to control humans. Dr. Vasquez? Elena turned to see a young Vortani approaching respectfully. His name was Keshtal, and he was barely an adult by his species standards. His parents had died 5 years ago, killed while dismantling the neural implant factories they had helped build. "I brought flowers," Keshtal said quietly, holding out a bundle of earth roses. "For David. I know I never met him, but I wanted to honor his memory." Elena studied the young alien's face. There was genuine sorrow there, not the performative guilt she had seen from some species in the early years. Keshtal had grown up learning about what his people had done. He chose to remember the victims as individuals, not just numbers. "Thank you," Elena said, accepting the flowers. "David would have liked you. He always believed people could change, if they really wanted to." They placed the flowers together at the base of David's name. Around them, other humans and aliens moved quietly through the garden. Some came to mourn. Others came to learn. All came to remember. The memorial garden was part of something larger, the Institute for Restorative Justice that Elena now directed. It was not about punishment anymore. The aliens had already surrendered their governments and accepted human oversight. Now it was about healing the wounds that slavery had left in both oppressor and victim. Dr. Shektal worked alongside Elena every day. He was a former Vortani neural engineer who had spent 3 years wearing a replica of the implants his people had designed. He had volunteered for the experience, wanting to understand what humans had endured. The device had been programmed to suppress his creativity and independence, just as the original implants had done to humans. It was educational, Shektal said when people asked about his voluntary slavery. I learned that taking away someone's ability to think freely is not just cruel. It is evil. There is no other word for it. Now Shektal and Elena worked together, studying how entire civilizations could recover from the trauma of systematic oppression. Their research drew visitors from across the galaxy, species that wanted to understand how to build better relationships with those they had wronged. But forgiveness remained complicated and personal. Marcus Webb still worked in the rebuilt shipyards of Earth's orbital stations. His entire family had been killed by Kethmori guards during a failed escape attempt 30 years ago. Now he supervised construction crews that included reformed Kethmori workers. I don't forgive them, Marcus told visitors who asked about his feelings. I may never forgive them, but I work with them because the future requires it. My children will inherit whatever galaxy we build together. His construction partner was Velkanos, a Kethmori whose grandfather had been a camp commander. Velkanos had volunteered to work under Marcus's supervision as a form of penance. They never spoke of personal matters, but they built ships together that would explore the galaxy in peace instead of conquering it. Forgiveness is not required for cooperation, Marcus explained to his daughter Sarah, who was now 25 and had never known slavery. But respect is essential. Velkanos has earned my respect through years of honest work and genuine change. The relationship was formal but functional. Marcus still grieved for his lost family. Velkanos still carried shame for his heritage. But together they created something new and hopeful. Different outcomes emerged across the galaxy as individual humans made personal choices about forgiveness and cooperation. Admiral Lisa Chun had found something closer to peace. Her crew aboard the USS Redemption had become like a family during the war against the Void Swarm. Lieutenant Commander Rix Now, the young Vortani, now served as her second-in-command. They had shared danger and loss in ways that created bonds, stronger than species loyalty. Captain, Rixnall said as they orbited a newly discovered world, long-range sensors show this planet has intelligent life. How do we approach them? Lisa smiled at the question. 5 years ago, first contact would have meant conquest for most alien species. Now her mixed crew represented something different. The possibility of meeting new civilizations as equals and friends. We introduce ourselves honestly, Lisa replied. We tell them who we are, what we've learned, and offer them the choice to join us or remain independent. No forced alliances. No imposed governments. The new first contact protocols had been written by humans and aliens working together. They emphasized respect, consent, and the right of all species to determine their own futures. It was a radical change from the old ways of galactic expansion, but some relationships remained more difficult to heal. President Santos, now in her 70s, attended the weekly Reconciliation Council meetings where humans and aliens discussed their ongoing challenges. Today's session focused on a problem that had no easy solutions. The sectar youth movements are concerning, reported Dr. Yem Call, a sectar sociologist. Young Sectar who were born after the Void-Sworn War don't understand why their species should accept human oversight. They see it as an outdated punishment for crimes they didn't commit. This was the challenge of intergenerational trauma and responsibility. How long should an entire species accept restrictions for the crimes of their ancestors? How could new generations learn from history without being forever defined by it? Education is key, President Santos replied. But it must be education about consequences, not just history. The young Sectar need to understand that trust is built slowly and lost quickly. Some alien youth had never known slavery or oppression. To them, humans were just another species with too much power. They couldn't understand why their parents submitted to human authority, or why they should feel guilty for events that happened. Before they were born, the solution was gradual and careful. Species that showed genuine institutional change over many years began to receive increased autonomy. The Zephyrians, who had dismantled their neural implant technology completely and spent years making amends, were the first to regain partial self-governance under human oversight. It's not about punishment, Elena explained to a group of young aliens visiting the Institute. It's about proving that your species has truly changed. Trust must be earned through consistent actions over time. The ultimate test came on the 10th anniversary of the Void-Sworn War. The Terran Memorial Garden held its largest remembrance ceremony ever. Representatives from every species in the galaxy attended, including some who had initially refused to acknowledge their participation in human slavery. Ambassador Zethver's grandson, now Chancellor Kethvar of the reformed Zephyrian government, planted a tree in memory of the humans who had died on his world. The ceremony was simple and private, attended only by humans who had been personally affected by Zephyrian actions. Elena watched as the young Chancellor's hands shook while he placed the small tree in the ground. His grandfather had helped design the original enslavement plan. His father had built the neural implant factories. Now he was trying to build something better. This tree will grow for centuries, Chancellor Kethvar said quietly. Long after we are gone, it will remind future generations that the cost of oppression is always higher than the cost of freedom. The words were simple, but Elena could hear the genuine understanding behind them. This young alien truly comprehended what his species had done. More importantly, he was committed to ensuring it never happened again. After the ceremony, Elena walked through the garden with Admiral Chun, both women now old but still vital. They paused before the central monument, which bore a simple inscription: "Never again, never forgotten, never simple." "Do you think we've succeeded?" Lisa asked. "Have we built something that will last?" Elena considered the question carefully. Around them, humans and aliens worked together, learned together, and slowly built trust through shared experiences. It wasn't perfect. Some relationships remained formal and distant. Some humans would never forgive. Some aliens still struggled with guilt and shame. "We've built a foundation," Elena replied. "Whether it lasts depends on whether future generations choose to maintain it. Redemption isn't a destination. It's a choice that must be made every day." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun set through the garden's transparent dome. Below them, Earth turned slowly in space, no longer a prison, but a symbol of survival and renewal. The galaxy was safer now, more just and more cooperative than it had ever been. Former enemies had learned to work together. Trust had been